Good evening, everybody, and happy Halloween. So my buddy Derek of the Game Explain variety has been doing this pretty cool Castlevania marathon as of late, where he's live streaming just about every entry in the series, and so far it's been pretty entertaining watching him pop his Castlevania cherry on a lot of entries he hasn't played until recently.
Yeah, we're dead.
Now, jokingly, I suggested that he play Haunted Castle, a 1988 arcade game that was, in the loosest fashion, an adaptation of the original Castlevania on the NES. For the longest time, I thought the game was only available via emulation, so I didn't expect Derek to go through with it, but then we found out that the game was actually given a PS4 release. So he played it, beaten it, and then challenged me to review it, so here we are. Good on you, Derek, but I'll have you know this isn't my first rodeo, so I'll gladly boot the game up and take you on. Alright, what do we got here? Zombies? I put plenty of those in my day. Oh my god, my health! Shit. I love the advertisement of the game. Not even Dracula knows what I'm getting into. He's like, what the fuck is that smell? So as I said, Haunted Castle was released in the arcades in 1988. It was common practice of Konami back in the day to make console adaptations of arcade games. They did it with Contra, they did it with Gradius, but Castlevania was the odd one out. That started as an NES game that got an arcade makeover, a reverse of the usual, and until the Japanese exclusive Castlevania the Arcade released in 2009, this was the only time Castlevania got any sort of arcade love. And if you couldn't guess why at this point, well then, here we go. The title screen is pretty cool, basically a straight rip of the classic Castlevania 1 box art, but again, I'm enamored with Dracula's face here. It's so dopey. Ooh, what's this I got here? What is that? The game begins with Simon and his newlywed Serena walking down the road when Dracula suddenly swoops in like, sup bitch, and then goes and kidnaps Serena. Simon then swaps his wedding attire with some kinky barbarian gear and heads off to save his wife. Typical Castlevania affair, but I never took Dracula as a cockblocker until now. What a dick. Also, this is almost one-to-one Ghosts and Goblins. I wonder if that was intentional or not. But, whew, man, okay, so here we go. You know, this isn't a terrible looking arcade game for 1988. I wouldn't call this a Belmont strut. It's more like a Belmont stomach cramp. He ain't looking for his wife. He's looking for the nearest public restroom. And that's not the only strange pose Simon has here, as her animation looks more like a breakdance jump, and you tell me what Simon's doing here on the overworld map. It's like, what the fuck is this? Who does this shit? The skeletons here, look at that. That's not a walk. That's shuffling. Environments tend to look overly flat and lack depth, but the aesthetic is full of spooky vibes that fit right in with the Castlevania name. And it's got bright colors to boot, and that might not be very scary to some, but I think it's appropriate given Castlevania's roots. It's like an overproduced film from the Hammer era that was shot in color. There's nothing wrong with a little monotony when it comes to horror, but this is what I expect from this series, and that certainly extends to the music. Holy shit, this soundtrack might be small, but it is awesome. Right from the start, you're greeted with Cross Your Heart. A theme, in my opinion, is right up there with Vampire Killer, Bloody Tears, and Beginning as a kick-ass opening theme. Speaking of Bloody Tears, that gets a cool remix here. The Abandoned Mine is appropriately creepy. Oh, the theme that plays when you're crossing the crumbling bridge. That is so good, but fuck, this bridge takes forever! When it comes to the sound, this is Castlevania the way I love it. Simon's got the usual moveset. It's based on Castlevania 1, so the stiff jump is here. You got the whip that can't be aimed in multiple directions, but it can be upgraded into a mason, and finally a sword, strangely. I think this is the first and only time a Belmont uses a sword, and it looks so wrong. There's also a couple of different sub-weapons to use, of course. The Holy Water isn't here, but you got this bomb straight out of Looney Tunes that fundamentally acts the same, and instead of a Holy Cross, you have this boomerang that, well, let's be honest, sucks as a boomerang because it doesn't return back to you. It's more accurate to call it a metal tube sock. There is a cross weapon in some regard. It's not a screen nuke, it just shoots out some mini crosses that can rack up the damage quick, especially against bigger targets. The best weapon, though, is undoubtedly the stopwatch. Unlike the console games, this son of a bitch freezes everything, including bosses, and only costs 2 hearts to use instead of the usual 5. Though it's not like you'll have much hearts at all because they're so goddamn scarce in this game. There's no candles to whip. You gotta get hearts from enemies now when they die, which doesn't always happen, or it does happen but you can't collect them because of a bottomless pit. You'll be relying on your whip most of the time to deal with things, and when fully upgraded to the sword, the damage is pretty significant, but when you aren't trying to kill things, Haunted Castle is certainly busy killing you. Yeah, it's one of those games. Haunted Castle is a quarter muncher, a quarter goblin. You're not only bombarded with enemies and obstacles that do absurd amounts of damage, but you also only have one life. One life. And in the original arcade release, you only had 3 continues. Use them all up and you're back to the title screen. Surprisingly punishing for an arcade game. You would think Konami would give you infinite continues as long as you're willing to pump the machine full of quarters to keep going, as did many games at the time did, but no, 3 lives, 3 attempts, and that's all you're getting. Even stranger, if you really wanted to, you can spend your 3 continues to make your health bar larger. This ensures that you're likely to survive the current stage, but this also means that if you die once, that's it, you're back to the title screen. Haunted Castle doesn't fuck around, man. You gotta be some sort of Transylvanian wizard to beat this game as originally designed. Is that even possible? By the 3rd stage, they throw so much shit at you. The Flamen are the worst. If you don't have the sword, they take too many hits to kill, and since they move so fast, it's practically guaranteed damage. And don't get a game over in the clock tower. If you continue on from here, this kind of shit happens. Yeah, thanks, assholes. And what the hell is up with this part in the castle? You get around here and then you're suddenly teleported to another dimension where you then kill off a couple of harpies and then you're back in the castle. This never happens again and is so mind-boggling that I have to ask, what the fuck was that about? Did I snort a shitload of coke the night before the wedding to deal with anxiety and it's only now catching up to me? Shit, the true enemy of this game is Simon's inner demons. Well, I'm playing this off of Konami's arcade archives where I not only have infinite quarters, but I can also choose to play the Japanese and European releases where enemies do way less damage here. So why is the game harder for Americans? Isn't it usually the opposite? But with unlimited continues and quarters, it's only a matter of time before you beat the game. You cross Dracula's overly long bridge, you get to the man himself, and he's pretty damn easy. But then he unleashes his true power and becomes a giant head. That is also pretty damn easy, and with enough sword swipes, he deflates like a balloon. Your wife is saved, the castle crumbles, happily ever after. This is $8 on the PlayStation Store. Well, I think the music's great. This ain't even worth that. I'm sorry, unless you need to add this to your collection, or maybe you want to play the game as originally designed because your spiked dildo wasn't painful enough, there isn't much to earn by playing this. Even with the dick-headed difficulty, you can beat this game in about half an hour. Nah, you're better off playing with something else. But you know what? Let's go look at something else. I'm in a Castlevania mood as of late, so let's pop in Castlevania Chronicles on the PlayStation 1. Now this here was released in 2001 in a post-Symphony of the Night time frame, which you can tell by the cover art as Ayami Kojima was the one who illustrated the new key art, as well as Simon's new threads. It's a little too BDSM for my liking, and I guess Simon only had enough money for half of his fur coat, but whatever, it's not the worst interpretation I've seen. It's not Buff Light Yagami, that's for sure. Castlevania Chronicles is in fact 2 games, technically speaking. The first is a straight port of the 1993 Akumajo Dracula, a remake of the original Castlevania on the NES, initially released for the Japanese-only Sharp X 68000, a home computer that cost as much as a car back in the day, so good luck trying to get that shit now. I don't know what Konami's fascination was with re-releasing the first Castlevania all the time. They did it with Vampire Killer, Haunted Castle, Super Castlevania 4. It's like there was a law that if there was a new home console being released, it needed its own version of Castlevania 1. Well, unlike Super Castlevania 4, which was more of a reimagining of Simon's first romp with Dracula, this Castlevania was much closer design-wise to the NES original. It has a handful of brand new areas to trek through, like an ice cavern and a more elaborate cave system, but most of the other levels are straight from the NES game with new graphics and added extensions to flesh them out, and fuck this game! Oh my god, you know, one of the things I really enjoyed about the original, even today, was that, yeah, it kicked you in the balls, but it didn't do so repeatedly in the same stage. Stages were, for the most part, short and sweet, not really overbearing. This meant that you can beat the game in under an hour, sure, but the adventure was still tough, fulfilling, and more importantly, fun. This game? No, stages are overly long, they starve the shit out of you for health, and by the second half, the game has the American Castlevania 3 problem where enemies now dish out more damage because of reasons. You have multiple lives and infinite continues, but it's borderline insane how much they expect you to do with the lack of resources given. I mean, as far as mobility goes, it's fine. You can control your jumps in midair like in Super Castlevania 4, so platforming is not so much the issue. But enemy and obstacle placement is some of the worst in the classic series, and like before, you can't jump on or off stairs. And sure enough, they love spamming those tiny annoying enemies when you're climbing them, and there's no whip dangly thingy to help you out or true multi-directional whipping. You can whip straight down and downwards diagonally, but this does little to alleviate the asinine structure of some of these levels. Now early on, you can get by relatively comfortably if you take your time, observe enemy patterns, and proceed along, but then the game becomes over-reliant on gotcha moments. Obstacles that you can't overcome by observation, but rather knowing how to deal with them after you already died to them. The worst kind of trial and error. The clock tower level is the king of this shit because there's simply no way in hell you're gonna know that these gears will pop off from the wall and crash right into you. Whether it's right before a staircase or in this moment too far up the screen to see clearly, shit like that's cheap. And then there's the boss. I mean, my god, I fought werewolves before, but this one is just so fucking angry. She's ripping shit off the walls and throwing them at me, even the clock numbers. I only won this fight when I decided to get crazily aggressive, like I was jumping around as much as she was. I guess sometimes it pays to be reckless, I suppose. This part right here always felt luck-based. The skeletons are just out of reach with your whip, and it's next to impossible to climb up the stairs without getting pelted by their bones. You either get lucky and have one of them fall to the ground below, which again doesn't always happen, or you just take the hit and get them out of the way because again you can't jump on or off stairs. When the game is referencing the NES levels, then, you know, it's alright. I kind of know what to expect, how to deal with specific enemies, but this game also likes fucking with veterans. Like right here. Now in the original, I know there's some pot roast in the wall here, so let me grab that real quick and But in Chronicles, there's nothing here but an infinite well of fleamen. You jerks, I just want my meat. No, seriously, where's the goddamn meat? I feverishly whip every wall and crevice and I either don't find any or I do find something on the opposite side and I can't get to it on time. I couldn't finish this game. I stopped after I couldn't get past the second to last stage. I know I was so close, but I got exhausted. Having to travel through all that nonsense again, the long hallways, this Frankenstein monster that takes too many goddamn hits to kill, and then death himself. The stage in the original was no slouch either, but this just went overboard. But thankfully for me, that's what Castlevania Chronicles Arrange Mode is for. Okay, I sort of lied. Castlevania Chronicles is not really two games. It's the same game, but Arrange Mode changes up a couple of things, namely the difficulty. It's more balanced to start with, and if that isn't enough, you can change the difficulty to your liking. Enemies no longer kill you on a couple of hits in the second half of the game. It's like the Japanese version of Castlevania 3. And now, because I can actually fucking breathe, I can go ahead and proceed where I left off. I mean, you still have to try. It is classic Castlevania after all, and a lot of bullshit also comes from the inherent level design. But not having to worry so much about your current health, believe me, makes things much more manageable. I'm less of a paranoid wreck and can get to the last level and face off against Dracula all in a matter of time. I'm not sure how I feel about Dracula's final form in this version of the game. I know it's the precursor to this badass looking beast, but the way his mouth jitters creeps me out. Ugh. Arrange Mode also gives Simon his new Kojima design in case you didn't feel like playing as Conan the Belmont. And supposedly there's added graphical effects for some visual pizzazz, though I personally only noticed the different explosions whenever I killed enemies. I mean, I guess that counts. The biggest change is the soundtrack. Now, the X68000's music is by no means bad. In fact, it's one of the best things about the game. It was the game that introduced some of my favorite tunes in the series, namely the loading song that played when you were booting up the game on the original hardware, and the Moonfight song. That's such a good tune, but Arrange Mode, I mean, you have to listen to it for yourself because once you put it on blast, it's fucking party time. Arrange Mode is the way to go if you want to play this rendition of the original Castlevania, but no matter what I think of the better difficulty or sweet rave music, I'd still rather play the NES original or Super Castlevania 4 for my Simon vs. Dracula action. The NES game is so tightly designed and doesn't overstay its welcome while having just the right amount of challenge. It's still frustrating, but it doesn't piss me off. And Super Castlevania 4, I mean, Simon is such a joy to utilize in that game and its atmosphere is second to none. Castlevania Chronicles, at the very least, is pretty cheap on the PlayStation Store. It's only $6, so you're not breaking the bank. And hey man, if you want to kick yourself in the balls, give the original mode a try. If you can beat that, consider yourself a good Castlevania player. I just don't think it's worth the frustration personally. But with that said, I hope you guys had a happy Halloween, happy vampire hunting, and here's to playing as Simon in the next Smash Brothers game. Damn man, I can't wait to sink my teeth into that. It's about a month away, I'm so excited. But in the meantime, there's more games to look at. Thank you all for watching, have yourselves a fantastic night, and take care.